How's everyone doing today?
Doing good.
Pretty
Excited
good.
to be here.
Learning lots about NFTs today?
A little bit.
Yeah. That's the point, right?
I think so. So I'll do a quick introduction. My name's Danny. I lead the growth teams at Nirvana Labs and Helica, blockchain infrastructure and advanced analytics. Go ahead.
Name's Ed Prado. I am the CEO and co-founder of Veradittakit. We are a Web3 multimedia platform. So imagine OpenSea meeting Netflix and kind of bonding together. That's what we've put together. So anything from minting of the actual asset to a venue that allows you to distribute it, and then management tools that allow you to analyze it. That's what we've done.
Awesome. And Ed and I just discovered we went to the same school as well.
Nice.
I'm Anthony Vassallo, been at Silicon Valley Bank for 7 years, focus on product and strategy, mostly in commercial lending and in our crypto go-to-market.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. I'm Paul Veradittakit. I'm a managing partner at Pantera Capital. Pantera Capital is one of the largest and earliest institutional funds investing into cryptocurrencies and blockchain. We've been doing it since 2013. We manage about $5 billion. We're going into both equity and tokens, early stage and mid stage, and I lead our investment team and investment efforts, and we used to bank with SVB.
All right. Well, let's get kicked off. So maybe to start things off, we should talk about what is token gating. Ed, you want to take it?
Sure. So in my mind, utilizing a token to provide access to some functionality, that's probably the most broad definition. I will say, in sort of looking at the market, token gating has become somewhat commoditized. And I've seen everything from an NFT unlocking a URL that's very shareable to a very robust system like what we do, where it's very integrated and it's very encrypted and it's only for you and it requires a wallet signature every time you experience the video or whatever we're streaming to you. But I think that in the backdrop, and this is really important, token gating and providing utility is probably the most important sort of part of the ecosystem in my mind for NFTs because it provides utility. We've moved beyond the Bored Apes or the PFPs and the JPEGs, and obviously the Bored Apes are still exciting, but the idea that you can actually create utility is going to actually foster mainstream adoption, and that's really what is going to create excitement in my mind in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. It's basically anything that a token can open, right? So for one-to-one, I think we all probably have a decent understanding in this room, but exclusivity, ability to build community and connect to platforms, content in your case, and just get a little bit more value extracted for being an owner.
Yeah, I think we've been looking at crypto since 2013, and again, it's all about timing, right? We, in 2015 and 16, we're actually looking at, I guess, tokens for ticketing. And so that was kind of our first, like, hey, this makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of fraud in ticketing right now. What if we can, have that be put on the blockchain and, use that for authentication? Kind of a little early for its time. I think we're starting to actually see manifestation of that in sort of NFTs and being able to sort of gate access to a bunch of different experiences, like you mentioned. And, I think for us, it's pretty cool. It started off with maybe, gating play to earn, and now I think there's a bunch of different things that it sort of unlocks. We actually think that token utility is really going to be what drives the next wave for NFTs. The PFPs and all that kind of stuff, it was fun, but at the end of the day, being able to use NFTs not only for sort of access, but actually for identity. So one of the companies we invest into, Unstoppable Domains, they issue a ton of sort of NFT domains out there, and that sort of plugs into sort of on-chain assets to be able to create an identity for you. And then, of course, once you sort of pair up, I guess what the panel is about too, e-commerce, it becomes really, really interesting. So we're excited about the token utility NFTs.
Sounds like there's a lot of future applications to it. So I guess in today's time, right? Who's token gating today? What projects are we seeing token gating? What brands are we seeing token gating?
I think the biggest use of token gating right now is to guard people from Discord. I mean, basically, sadly enough, I mean, it's a good use of it. But if you're part of a community, you can enter that community's Discord channel with your NFT, which is very primitive in my mind. But like anything, it's going to move slowly and then it's going to move very, very quickly. We've talked to a variety of consumer brands, and consumer brands are still trying to wrap their head around this thing. My sense is you have the Nikes of the world that are using NFTs as a sales channel, and then you have other brands thinking, okay, is it a sales channel? Is it marketing? I'm convinced it's a marketing channel, and it's a loyalty sort of asset that can be put out there, and that asset will then come with the perks of, you know, private videos, private like events, private live streams of their new products, all of which involve some kind of gating through that NFT. So yeah, that's who's using it out there, and I think in being in the space for 3 years, we keep looking and watching and waiting for others to really come forward with this. And there's a little bit of a rumbling out there, but everybody was so obsessed with the hype cycle of selling some pudgy penguin for thousands of dollars that everybody sort of just removed themselves from creating that utility. And now we're past that, and everyone's like, well, what else can we do? And that's where this utility comes in.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for someone to use the word cartoon, and maybe we can say that they're still fun in the present tense a little bit. Yeah, when I think of token gating, I don't think anybody's particularly interested about having their name or wallet tied to code on a blockchain. It's literally, what does it open? So if we think about what is fenced, I think the easiest example is Discord. And then how do you get on the other side, and what's the benefit of that? So you can see things like fractionalization of real world assets, increasing liquidity and access to high value assets. You mentioned customer rewards and loyalty. It's probably one of the more practical examples. And then just provenance and authenticity as well. So think about, what does having this code enable you to do, and what do you get? That's why I think token gating is pretty broad, and there's really a number of opportunities that we can see going forward, and continued iterations around what has already worked, to the extent that it complies with regulation, of course.
Yeah, I agree with everything that these guys have said. I mean, one of our portfolio companies, they're Space Runners. They work with Balmain, and of course, there's been stuff happening with like Nike and Tiffany's, and so there's been, especially in a bear market where you're trying to find revenue. I mean, I think there's been a shift towards trying to integrate institutions, love tokenized real world assets, and then also, you know, larger brands, luxury brands, and other enterprises to try to see, hey, you know, how do we further, you know, engage our audience and be able to sort of create this, I guess, like this new loyalty program, new better way to market by, you know, sort of just like knowing more information about your users and being able to sort of target them based off of like what sort of items that they have and on-chain data and that sort of thing. And then I think it eventually will go to more and more of the, you know, smaller creators and what they can sort of do. So I think there's a lot of companies and tools out there to allow people to, you know, whether it's like things that they're selling, e-commerce, just like trying to create more loyalty and engagement just through the creation of tokens and figuring out how that, you know, NFTs and figuring out how that kind of plays into their ecosystem.
100%. And like, so yeah, token gating, like I use like token proof, right? Like if I want to go to these NFT parties, like I have to verify that I hold their asset, go into the events tonight, and that's what I think token gating is a lot of right now, similar to Discord. But is that the future of token gating, right? Like that's the thing we want to talk about. Like, is the future of e-commerce, like, is that all owned by NFT? Like, is Amazon Prime going to get rid of Amazon Prime, and in order to access Prime, you have to hold their NFT? Like, what do you guys think, you know, the future of, you know, e-commerce is, and where's token gating kind of, you know, playing to there?
I think there's two drivers. There's content and there's accessibility. Currently, as we all know, the Web3 market is kind of mired by the accessibility friction. It's not easy to download MetaMask and be in a true Web3 world. And we realized this, we were fighting that battle. We really thought that was the way to go. But 2 months ago, we're like, we are going to partner with a wallet, and we're going to allow you to do a social login. So kind of Web 2.5. That's really important, because without that, it's really difficult to bring in mainstream America. Like you describe oh, and you have these seed phrases, you got to put it away, and like people just gloss over and you lose them. So I think the accessibility thing is really important. And then the other driver is content. I mean, if you had an ability to log in and have a custodied wallet that was really Ethereum in the back, and it's a true NFT, and that gave you something that you got excited about, all of a sudden this vertical would soar. And this was very similar to how the internet operated. I lived through the whole internet world, and at first it was just a bunch of bulletin boards, and then all of a sudden it got really exciting because there were applications in there, eBay, Amazon, all that got people to come to the internet in droves. So we need content that's exciting enough for people to kind of migrate. And it won't even be, if done properly, it won't be a migration. It'll just be like a follow-on, and they'll just be using Web3 and they wouldn't have recognized it. That's what we need.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the bottlenecks are education and adoption, and you don't need to know how an email is sent to benefit from using it, but I think it takes a level of willingness and a bit of hosting on that behalf. I think one of the coolest applications that you already have seen is in gaming, and I know a lot of gamers are kind of anti-NFT because they think it's decayed, what they're really playing, etc. And I think terms like play to earn can be cringe, but if you think about the abilities, what it opens up, future channels for devs, and the ability to influence storylines, to trade, sell, or even rent in-game assets and create NFTs, I think that's a real example of what the token opens within a place for gamers. And building on your point, if we can get to a point where we don't need to have gamers understand how you get from A to B, but just benefit from the technology, I think that's what's going to open the honeypot.
Yeah, I think for us, like what gets really interesting is, with NFTs, I mean, again, it becomes your identity, and with that, you could potentially, sort of build up your own identity and decide sort of what data you want to share, and with that, I mean, it becomes really fascinating because then, e-commerce could really depend on both like off-chain data and on-chain data, and you can kind of just get a better experience through, again, Web3. Obviously, you have control, and you can actually just monetize whatever data you want based off of that sort of control. So I think that's kind of cool about sort of Web3 and everything about sort of like things being on-chain. I think the other thing is really like NFTs, especially around gaming or maybe even storytelling. I mean, again, like if designed the right way, I mean, it can give you power around governance. And so because of that, you can decide how a story is sort of told and become part of the creation process and become part of the decision making. So I think that's a pretty cool thing that we're trying to sort of see evolve around governance.
It's pretty cool stuff. I guess, what industries do you guys think start adopting, token gating first? Like, do you see this being in banking? Do you see this being in, brands like, Macy's or Estee Lauder? Like, where do you guys think we start to see more of that mainstream adoption? They figure out some of the UX problems, and it's integrated to everyday life.
I think we actually did a deep dive on this because we're trying to go out and promote our product. And the bottom line, like I call it grassroots, it's artists, degens, and like independent filmmakers. People that are willing to get to some new distribution strategy. Above that, you've got influencers and content creators, people that are on like YouTube that have a Patreon account and are selling subscriptions and would rather sell an NFT that's a collectible. And then above that, kind of pie in the sky, are the brands and media and entertainment. It is so hard to penetrate media and entertainment and brands with a new product. They're just trying to wrap their head around this whole new technology. So we see a lot of resistance. And then once you get in there and you get to the altar, they're like, okay, we love this. We're going to send you to procurement. And then you're like 9 months getting approved as a vendor. So you're like, whoa. So that's sort of the lay of the land. I think that it's awesome that there is such a sense of community, and we're trying to get some real degen artists and some cool content, have that cool kind of element into our platform, because that fosters this like flywheel of just coolness that then comes back at you.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what was said there, because at the end of the day, I mean, we've taken a look. I mean, YouTube takes, 40% fees, and so to be able to sort of have a platform that, can do commerce without, sort of intermediaries, and also be able to issue something that encourages engagement and also increases, or adds another revenue line, I think is pretty interesting. I think one thing that is probably going to be a lot more common. I mean, as you guys know, Solana's launching their phone pretty soon, and then I think there's some other projects that are launching their own phones. And if you can kind of keep that low cost, and especially targeting like emerging markets, I mean, I think that kind of helps out with like, the adoption of NFTs and the usage of NFTs for token gating, because at the end of the day, what's kind of holding the industry back a little bit is the fact that we are a mobile-first society, yet we still have, most of the people here using Apple, and it's like walled garden. So if you can move over to an Android and maybe even more of a crypto-friendly environment, then I think that could really open up the channels for NFTs to really take off.
Yeah, I think you both made really good points. It's about opening access, getting to other users, retaining those users, definitely mobile first, and I think your hierarchy made a lot of sense. Danny, I'm flattered that you think that token gating would apply first to banks before anything else.
Just a question.
I don't think there's necessarily a low-hanging fruit. I can think of ways that banks could use non-fungible tokens for anything one-of-one accounts, et cetera. But just going back to the examples that you two shared, I think the more relevant component that banks can take on rather than trying to embrace token gating on their own is to really bank the space and provide things like traditional banking services, on off-ramp capabilities, maybe custodying some of these tokens that open up these gates, perhaps building some bespoke investment lending products, et cetera. And once that foundation is more in place and conversations are healthy and there's a mutual understanding and ongoing dialogue with regulators, you might even see advisory services. So helping some of the entrepreneurs of these NFTs navigate the complexities of cross-border transactions, tax, accounting, et cetera, and do it more efficiently and help these builders reach that next wave of customers.
Yeah, I think we actually were approached with an interesting use case. It's way premature and before its time, but in the banking sector, you've got NFTs, and this was mentioned earlier, that they really may be a sort of an identifier of the person who has the account. So where's the benefit there? Like, you could literally log into a chat with Chase Bank, and they know it's you because you have a soulbound token in your wallet, and only you have that token, and they know they've issued that token. So it could be used for a really slick sort of user experience where you're not put on hold or asked 10 times to verify who you are, and then, it could be a lot smoother. But for that to happen, this has to get to an enterprise level, and we have to kind of go through all the machinations that we're going through now in order for them to adopt it. And sure enough, they will adopt it because it just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we're looking at right now too is, again, if we're starting to see tokenization of a lot of different things, and then a lot of different things are sort of NFTs, then again, the cross-section of NFTs and DeFi, I think, become really, really fascinating, especially if you lower the transaction cost of being able to sort of like lend and borrow using these different assets as collateral. I mean, and then, obviously, like, real-world assets and revenue streams and things like that. I mean, and then of course the identities tied to sort of like under-collateralized loans. I mean, I think that's the cool thing about the data is that, like, you can really reduce sort of the collateral for all of these loans if you actually know more about these different, wallets and stuff.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think the underwriting is really interesting on that. And to the extent that DeFi can come together with crypto companies, think of Web 2 companies serving Web 3, so custodians, exchanges, et cetera, and banks coming together as a trio, if you will, in a balance and contributing what they're all respectively good at, I think that'll really open a lot of doors. So I think banks can help a lot with the regulatory compliance, secure transactions, and the things that require a license. The centralized companies have the expertise in industry and can probably move a little bit faster and do things that don't require that license. And then you have all the benefits that you mentioned of DeFi, including transparency. So to the extent that all can come together, so long as it's secure and protects consumers, I think it's going to be necessary. I don't know how that takes shape, but I think that's going to be required to innovate further.
It's awesome. Some really good stuff there. We're running down on time, so I want to give the audience, does anyone have any questions or any comments?
Yeah, how do we fight the negative connotation of token gaming in general? You know, people I feel would be, to get access to a venue that I could have got into for free before, now they don't get to buy their NFT. I feel like in Gen Pop, there's this concept of token gaming just like a money grab. So how do we fight that in terms of adopting?
I think it's very specific to the use case and what the application is, right? Like, you know, you could look at like a ticket concert, right? Like you're token gated by the ticket, right? It's the same concept. So like, I'm a firm believer that not everything should be in the blockchain. Not everything should be an NFT, right? It's only where it makes it a better user experience. We need verifiable assets, anything like that, like where an NFT technology actually makes things better. Absolutely, but like putting everything token gated just to make an NFT, I don't think that's the right answer. So it depends. Like if you are going to make an NFT and token gate, you know, some experience, whatever it is, the NFT should not just be for the token gate, right? The NFT should provide some other sort of utility and value, access to something, and the token gated part should just be to get into an event or the community or something else. Like it shouldn't just be about limiting access. It should be about everything else that the NFT is capable of.
I think the more we kind of move away from the hype cycle that were NFTs, so if you think of that one point in 2021 when the Beeple NFT sold and people were selling like a napkin on NFTs and making millions, I think the further you get away from that, the less people consider that whole, because that, what you're talking about is just opportunists that basically tooled the hype cycle. So I think the more we get content and the more apps are out there that actually properly encourage opportunity, that's gated through some digital asset. That's how I never even say NFT, it's a digital asset. Our system, we can provide an experience if you own X amount of Ethereum, an NFT, and you know, and had your wallet for at least 3 months. So that's the sort of thinking. This is a very different way to look at it. It's not just token gating NFTs to get into some rave party. And I think the more we move away from that, the more people will kind of understand it. And again, this is the exact same thing that happened on the internet 2.0. Like sock puppets got funded for billions of dollars, and the next week they weren't there because it wasn't a real business.
Yeah, I don't know how to combat the connotation exactly, but I would say if you truly need multiple instances of the same database and transparency, and you actually need to leverage DLT, then go for it. Use an NFT, but let's not create an additional barrier just because we think it's cool.
And I think the last thing I'll say is that like NFTs don't have to be paid. I mean, there's like, especially in gaming now, there's like free to mint, and so that's becoming more of a trend too.
One more question. Yeah, we're trying to develop that NFT marketplace for NFTs that give access, like access to places, access to apps, and access to events and other types of access, utilities and those sorts of things. What extent do you see that feasible and doable and technically good thing?
I think it's very feasible. That's what we're sort of doing, but we're more on the multimedia side. But like I said, when friction comes down and content and utility goes up, the consumer will come towards these apps. So I think it's a huge opportunity, but I will say it's very difficult. Like dealing in this segment is from a technical standpoint is challenging.
Awesome. I think we're up on time. We're getting kicked off, but thank you everyone for listening, and great chatting with you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.